Welcome to the AMRAP Mentality Podcast, a show we interview interesting people about how they make the most out of every single minute. On today's episode is Patrick Vellner. If you've been around CrossFit for a while, you've probably heard the name. He's been on the podium the last couple years and has been dominant in the sport. He just came off a huge win at Wodapalooza, which was super inspiring to watch. And what we dive into in this particular conversation is how he's balanced competing in the CrossFit Games, being a chiropractic student about to graduate, while also holding on to a long-distance relationship. We dive into his preparation, what he thinks about through the sport, and what he actually thinks about on the day of competing. I truly enjoyed this episode, and I hope you guys do as well. If you could, please rate, review, and share with your friends. We would greatly appreciate it. Guys, I hope you have a phenomenal day, and let's dive right into the episode. I'm super fascinated by how you came into the scene, how you came into the sport, and you've been able to stay, on the podium multiple times. I mean, it's fascinating to me how the last 3 years you've been on the podium 3 times, right? Third, second this year, right? And actually one of the years you didn't finish on the podium, but then you bumped up onto the podium because of
2017,
2017. And so what I'd like to know is a little bit more about your background, a little bit more about who you are, and share that story with people. Because for me, I want to know a deeper side of Patrick Vellner. Who are you? Where'd you come from? What are you currently up to? And what are you doing in your head? What are you doing in your work ethic that allows you to be at the top of the sport year after year after year? So I guess I'll back it up. So what were you into before you got into CrossFit?
This is going to be an interesting conversation because I'm not sure that I know all those things. So maybe we can figure it out.
Oh, we're going to figure it out together.
Yeah. So, okay. So before I started CrossFit, I was, so I grew up playing a lot of lacrosse and doing gymnastics. So my older brother was an acrobat as well, still is. And we,
when you say acrobat, are we talking like circus?
So he was a trampolinist for a long time, and he actually just finished like a 5-year stint with Cirque du Soleil.
Wow.
And he's trying to get into stunt work for film and stuff like that. So yeah, he's a phenomenal acrobat, legit, and made a career out of it, which is amazing. And then, so I competed in gymnastics until I was about 20. I lived out in Western Canada, and when I was about 20, I had a couple bad years of some injuries, some things like that. And just I don't know, I ended up moving away for university, and I decided rather than try to rebuild the same life that I had where I was living, I just said hey, we're going to turn the page, start a new chapter. And I'm done. I don't think I have much more to give into gymnastics. So I'm just going to we're going to hang it up and just call that a career. So at 20, I moved, and I moved around a bit in school. I lived in Vancouver for a year. I went to school there, and then I moved to Montreal.
This is in high school.
This is university.
This is in university.
Yeah.
So in high school, though, or the equivalent in Canada.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, high school. Yeah.
High school. You were a gymnast for the school team, or was it
no?
A club
So it's
team?
not really school based in Canada. Most of it's club. It's all club stuff.
And then did you do it before you were in high school as well?
Yeah. So from time I was probably 8 to 20.
8 to 20. Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, pretty good chunk of time. So it was it's I think that sports like that become very hard to leave, because you've invested so much time and effort into it, right? It's sort of it's so wrapped up in your identity. I remember trying to walk away from it and being fuck, maybe I'll give it one more year. I'll give it whatever. And it's really hard. It's and so I think that that's sort of, I might have been ready to be done gymnastics a year or two before even. But until I was moving, and I was going to have to find a new gym, find a new coach, find a new program. And I just didn't want to. And I was all right, this is a great excuse to leave. And so I just did.
So how'd you get into gymnastics? Were your parents into it?
My dad was a tower diver.
A tower diver?
Yeah. So he was an acrobat as well. And I think we just when we were growing up, my older brother did a little bit of diving, and then we ended up, I think early on, both my parents worked when we were young. So we were in after school programs and play school and whatever, and a lot of that stuff was run through a program that the gym club was affiliated with. So we would you do a half day in the classroom, you playing with your shapes and your colors, and then the afternoon you'd spend in the gymnastics club doing a lot of movement and just getting kids active. So when we were young, obviously we both really enjoyed that. And then from there, kind of as you get a bit older, some of the coaches in the recreational or competitive programs will say, hey, like why doesn't your kid try this? Like, they seem to really like it. And then we kind of like it snowballs from there. And we ended up just slowly, then you segue into competitive program. You start to add more hours a week, and then you're competing, and then you're in it. So it's sort of slowly built from there. And I also played when I was like, I don't know what, 12 or 13. I started playing lacrosse as well. So my younger brother and I both played lacrosse, and played some rugby as well. But I played lacrosse until I actually kept playing after I had moved. When I was living in Montreal, I played for a team in Vermont, actually. So I would commute from Montreal to Vermont on weekends to play lacrosse, and did that for a little bit. But it became hard to manage with school, and it was just the commuting was hard, and it was just like, I don't know, I was losing a lot of time. So I ended up stopping that as well.
And then you focused fully on school. So when you finished gymnastics, then you moved to university.
Yeah.
Did you know what you wanted to do at that point?
Not really. I had initially, when I went to school in Vancouver, I was thinking about trying to get into medicine. I went to school there for a year in a program that I didn't really like, because it was sort of just a stepping stone to get into a medical field. And then at the end of that year, I just didn't like it, and I was going to change programs. So I went to go take the steps to do that, and I was kind of like had missed the boat on it. So I just said, like, hey, rather than spend another year doing this program here that I hate, I just took a year off, and I worked back in Alberta for a year. I went and traveled. I did like 4 months abroad in like Asia, and came back, and then went to school in Montreal in a new program the next year, doing more like, I was kinesiology. I did an honors in kinesiology. So just more like movement, health, things like that. Thinking now about going more into like a physio style, something that's more of like a prophylactic care, like preventative care, a lot more like musculoskeletal, and mostly because through a career of sports, I had been treated a lot by therapists like that, and I enjoyed it, and I had a really good relationship. Like I had a great chiro growing up, and that's what I ended up deciding on. Is I just felt like, hey, I'm going to apply for this chiropractic program, and because I had a great experience with it, so I got into that after I graduated out of university in Montreal. So, and that's where I'm at now. I'm now finishing that in the next 4 months. So
how long? So you were in university, and you decided to become a chiro, right? Now you're about to finish school and all your stuff, which is extremely impressive. How long have you been in? How long was university? Was it a 4-year program?
So I did 1 year. I did 1 year in Vancouver, and then I took a year off.
Yeah.
And then I did 3 years in Montreal, and then my current program is 4 years.
4 years. So over the last 3 years, you've been on the podium. You've also been full-time as a chiro student.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep.
So talk to me a little bit about how that process works. I can understand why you wanted to get into chiropractic, because you kind of utilize some of these tools as you grew up. How did you get introduced to CrossFit, and how did it come in at that time? I mean, in the university, why were you drawn to it? How did you get introduced to it?
Yeah, so it was sort of whenever I get asked about that, like, how did you get into it? It was sort of just a timing thing, I think. So at the time, I just retired from gymnastics. I moved out east. Was in Montreal. I had just taken a year off of school. I'd done like traveled, got that out of my system. And I think I needed that. I needed some time away from sport and from like high intensity athletics, because gymnastics is a pretty hard competitive world. And I'd been balancing sports and academics for a long time, and it was just like, it was wearing me down. So it was nice to have that break. And
so when you were in Asia traveling, did you not really do anything physical almost for a year?
No, not really. It was 4 months.
Oh, it was 4 months.
I still went during the year. I worked full time, and then I still playing lacrosse, and I did I did little things here and there, but I wasn't focused on sport. And I think that trip gave me a good chance to kind of decompress. And then I got back to school in Montreal, and just started like, okay, go to the school gym, get back into like some sort of shape, mostly just doing kind of conditioning circuits I did in gymnastics, a lot of body weight stuff, a lot of high intensity interval stuff,
Yep.
And then I met some friends that I went to school with in Montreal that were doing CrossFit, and like, I didn't know that at the time, but kind of what happened is that one day we were there, and they were doing their workouts, and they had hung rings in the school gym, and I was like, oh, cool.
Oh, that's right up your alley.
Like, yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, do you guys mind if I play on the rings for a little bit and do some stuff? So I did some stuff on the rings that I hadn't been able to play with for a while because not every day you have access to that. And so they were like, oh, cool. Like, why don't you jump in with this workout with us? And I was like, sure, what are we doing? And we just kind of pieced something together, and I worked out with them. And we were kind of always in the gym at the same time. I was reasonably familiar with them. And so we just became friends, and we'd work out together because it's just better than working out by yourself, right?
Of course.
So I ended up doing like CrossFit workouts with them, and they would just sort of pick from various sources. And then I kind of, they would teach me how to weightlift a little bit, like the ins and outs of the things that I'd never done. And, in return, I teach them some cues on gymnastics stuff. And so we sort of helped each other out a little bit. And that was probably like end of the year, like say December 2012, early 2013. And then they're like, oh, like do the open. Like the open's this thing coming around. And I was like, all right, sure. So whatever it was, $20. And I signed up for the open that year and just got trashed. And I mean, I'm a competitive guy and I played a lot of sports, and I was like, I don't like that. And I think that I can be better at that. Like I easily identify holes and weaknesses and say like, all right, there's pretty clear weaknesses that I have as far as, powerlifting, weightlifting, things like that I'd never done, but I'm clearly way ahead of the curve on some things. And so I was like, there's some room to improve here. So that next year I was still at school. I just worked out with those guys all the time and dialed in a few little things for weightlifting, powerlifting. And then I qualified for the regionals the next year, barely. I think I redid the last open workout to like scrape in.
How many times did you redo it?
Just once.
Oh, just
and
once.
I think it was the burpee over bar and thruster.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
I just did that one once. That's I redid it once. And then I went to regionals, and I didn't really know anything about the competitive world of CrossFit either. I kind of just was like, cool. Like, so this is the next stage, and you can see the progression. It's like, okay, so this is the next step. Cool.
It showed you were doing better. It showed you were showing improvement.
I've progressed. Awesome.
Now, walking into your first regional experience, how many times did you compete in gymnastics? I mean, we're talking a lot. We're talking on a national level, or
nationally.
And did you what particular event did you do in gymnastics?
So I did what's called men's artistic gymnastics, and it's the 6 kind of Olympic events that you would see, like it'd be floor, pommel horse, rings, vault, parallel bars, high bar.
So pretty well rounded in that sense.
Yeah, and I mean I was always better at like supporting events like the pommel horse and the parallel bars. I was not as good at like floor because I was tall, and I wasn't very good at the rings because my levers are very long. Like there were certain things that I wasn't great at, but there were some things that I was pretty good at. So. But in general, I don't think that matters a lot in CrossFit.
No. The reason why I asked is just because of all your competition career. What skills did you develop from when you were 8 till when you were 20?
Yeah, that's what matters.
Allowed you to get into a regional at the age of whatever we're talking 24 at your first time around for a CrossFit event and place 5th. I mean, that's very impressive. I mean more your mindset. I mean, what did you get taught as a young child? Because gymnastics is a very stressful sport. It's an individual sport, but you're also on a team. So it's very unique. Mm-hmm. So can you take me through a little bit of how that benefited you for regionals?
So I would say, for one thing, expectations were low. Like, I had no idea. I was walking in there all right, like, let's give this a shot. I have no idea. So I think I started in, like, the bottom heat, and I won the handstand walk, and, like, I won my heat in the Nasty Girls event. And I was like, this is great. Like, and like, I think I PR'd my snatch in the competition, which was not, it was like 215 or something.
It was like a hang snatch that year, I think, or something like that. Yeah.
It was. And then, then the next day, like, I think the events, there was like a front squat, handstand push-up, burpee over bar event, and there was legless rope climb event. I'm like, legless rope climb's been doing that for years, no problem. Like, there was a lot of good events that kind of lent themselves to me. I'd be able to smash one and then survive the next one and then smash one. So, I think mostly what gymnastics is good at is teaching you how to perform on demand. I think that's one of the skills that probably most people who compete in CrossFit struggle with the most.
Perform on demand.
Yeah, performance on demand is just like it doesn't matter. And this is why live competition, in my opinion, is super valuable, especially in an era now like where we're going to start to transfer athletes out of the open straight to the games.
Right.
How many guys that can, like, in their home gym, if I can try it 3 times, like, I can nail it. But you don't get to do that in competition. That's not how competition works. I don't care if you nailed it 10 times in training, but you get one shot right now. Show me.
Right.
And that's what gymnastics is. It's like I'll do that routine 10 times a day in training, hit it 9 times out of 10, but I only get one chance in competition. And if you fall, it's like, okay, you fell, and now you've got whatever the events are timed, and you have a certain amount of time to restart and go. And then once you're done, okay, I fell on my floor routine. Like, that really sucks. That's the first event out of 6, but I still have 5 events, and you can't carry that over very long. Gymnastics, like you said, there's individual scores, there's team scores, there's individual event scores. So even if I wipe out and totally blow my all around score in the first event of the day, I can still win 5 medals on every other. Like, I can win every other event and still
right. But you have to be able to let that go.
Exactly.
And so do you see that as being 8 years old, getting into the sport? Did you have anybody that helped you learn to overcome that? Because I imagine as a kid, it's probably tough. I mean, even as a teenager, because you might have a bad event, and then that bad event might carry over to the rest of them. So did you that skill just come naturally to you, or did you have somebody talk to you about it? I mean, how did that work?
I don't think it's hard to say, again, because I've been doing it. I did it from when I was very young. I don't think I ever had anybody talk directly with me about it, about, this is how you have to work through that. We worked with some like sports psychs and stuff off and on. And I also went to school for like some stuff like that as well. Like, we took courses on that sort of stuff. But I think that it's a very learned skill that you have to be able to sort of acquire that over time with exposure. I think that the more competitions you go to, the more repetitions you go through, you start to get that and really buy into it. And it's hard. Like, I'm the same as anybody else. Like, if I miss a snatch 10 times in training, like, it's frustrating.
Right.
But like, today's not the day. It's not like your training life doesn't begin and end today. Like, sometimes you just have a bad day, and that it's okay, that you're allowed to. So you can't live and die by that. And so I think the ability to let stuff go is important. And especially in the context of competition, where like if you let something bleed over and overshadow into the next the next event, it can really be a detriment. So the CrossFit world is built in an all-around score the same way gymnastics was. The only difference between is that there's no prizes for the individual event wins, right? Like, it's actually all around score.
Right.
So it's even more valuable to try to, like, if you make a mistake, make sure that you preserve your performances on the remaining events. So I don't know. It's something that I think I've gotten better at over the years, and I think that I've always been good at in CrossFit because I had a decade of experience dealing with it.
100%.
And it's just now, and I get comments about it occasionally that like I'm not a spectacularly exciting athlete to watch. Like, I don't win and I don't lose, but I just like steady as she goes, I just plow ahead. Right?
And that's kind of like that, probably from that decade of experience.
Yeah, and that's just sort of like what I've learned to do. And that's what's important in this sport, is it's not about being the best at anything. Like, I don't have a wheelhouse workouts or wheelhouse things that I'm going to crush every single time. But there's just like, you got to get up pretty early in the morning to find something that I can't do well.
Right.
So it's just like, it's really...
Well, so talking about that, I want to talk about getting up early. So take me through your day, because here you are, you're just finishing Cairo school. You've been on the podium. So that means you had to go through the Open, regionals, and games the last couple of years in a row, right?
Yep.
You've competed at a high level. And you performed really well. So what else has transcended outside of competing into other areas of your life? Because, I mean, you also have a girlfriend, right?
Yep.
And so you have a girlfriend, you have school, you have this competing, and I imagine you have to balance sponsorships, things of that nature. So can you take us through a typical day of what is it like being Patrick Vellner? How do you segment out your day?
So the last few years have been different than this year, mostly because let's say the last 3 years, since I started in school at chiropractic. So I did that. 2015 was my first year of school there, and that was the first year I went to the games in 2015 on a team. Right. I actually competed against you there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a fun one.
Then that year, so after the games, then I started school in Cairo. So the next 4 years, basically, I finished on the podium as individuals those next bunch of years. So, starting in school, the first year, you just have to like figure out what you can get away with. Honestly, it's going to sound bad to people, but I've always been pretty good in my academics. And the good thing about a post-secondary education is that most times no one's babysitting you. You know,
right.
There's no one really is going to be on you about, you got to make sure you go to lecture, you got to whatever.
Yeah.
If that's what you need to learn, then do that. But you're an adult, figure it out.
Yeah, make your own decisions.
So they don't really care. And I was able to say, okay, this lecture, like I'm good at this material, I'm good at this. I mean, this 2-hour lecture, I can probably cover that material in half an hour if I do it by myself. I just go to the library and actually diligently work. So I did a lot of that in the first year, like figuring out what I could get away with as far as lectures. And then exam times are just stressful. Like everything's hard. Around exam times, I train a little bit less, but you also, like, there's no obligation to go to school. I just go write my exam, I go home. And then usually, you know, I'll write my exam, then I go straight to the gym, work for a bit, clear your head, go back to work, study a bit.
So how many hours are we talking training last couple of years in a row?
So mostly the last 3 years, say, of like my core years of school, I didn't go to much lecture. I would go to all my mandatory labs. So most days I'd probably, if it was coming into regionals or something, if I'm doing double sessions, I'll usually like train in the morning, leave, do a couple hours of work, train again, leave, go do a couple hours of work. So usually I'd break my day up into chunks of like 2 to 3 hours where I can do 2 hours of training, and after 2 hours I'm losing steam.
Right.
So I leave, and then I'll do some schoolwork. And same thing. If you ever try to sit and read a book for 3 hours straight, you can't. Like, you start to lose focus. You just really, like, in general, I guess the average person will start to, you know, reread the same sentence and start to lose their engagement. So 2 hours into reading my notes, I'm not working effectively anymore. So I leave, then I'll go train a little bit more, and then I'll come back, then I do that. And if I can keep cycling like that, I can maintain high efficiency of whatever I'm doing. And that's sort of what was important, is that, like, okay, if I'm going to not go to lecture, if I'm going to, like, try to do a lot of training, I need to make sure that I'm not just putting in hours, like I'm putting in work.
Right.
And that was what was
it's
important.
Focused work.
And there's always that, you know, you see people who spend 5 hours at the gym and they do 1 hour work, and, like, that's great. And same thing with school. I find people who go, you know, especially around exam times, people go and get into their library stats of like, oh, I was in the library for 7 hours, and like, I hope you learned 7 hours of stuff.
Right.
Because if you didn't, you just wasted your time.
Yep. And so you take that analogy basically into different areas of your life then, right?
Yeah,
so when you're there, you're all in.
Yeah,
right?
I try to be. And that's really, you know, you flip-flop between two different things. And as long as I can do that, I'm able to be effective. And that's actually kind of what scares me about when I graduate. I'm going to need to find something else to fill that slot. Because if not, I worry about, you know, if I just start to train full-time, do I lose that efficiency? Do I start to, you know, okay, well, now I've got the whole day, and then you drag your heels around and you lose a little bit. But it's been good. And in most days, like, I don't waste time. I transition fast between activities. Like, if I'm going to be studying for a while, and then I'm going to say, okay, like, I have the next 3 hours to be done my training session. Like, I have to get home, change over, get to the gym, get done my session, get back home in that 3 hours.
Yeah. So it's almost good. What I'm hearing from you is, like, it's almost good that you have these other priorities, because they encourage and require you to stay engaged while you're in it.
Yeah.
You know, I've experienced that
deadline,
myself, right? Especially with the family and different things, and keeps you on a timeline, keeps you focused. So pivoting a little bit, and then I want to get back to what you're going to do after you're done with school in a couple weeks. Yeah. Over the last few CrossFit Games, you've achieved levels of success. What are some things that you had to overcome? So, like, I don't have one in my mind that stands out, but if you had like a really poor event.
Have I, like, in the CrossFit Games? Yeah. I've had several. I would say every year I've had at least one really bad one. Every year.
What's an example of one?
So 2016, I was 35th in the ocean swim. 2017, I was 36th in the run, swim, run. 2018, I was 35th in the bike.
So now looking at those, right? And when you look at this body of work and you're saying, hey, these last couple of years I've done poorly in this style of event. Now, have you changed your training leading up into this year?
Yeah, I think that you have to try to, I mean, certain things, it depends what caused the failure. Like, I think that one of the important things is to be a little bit introspective about, like, why did this happen? And you can't spend a ton of time being like, what happened? What do I have to change? Like, probably you don't have to change a lot. Like, it's not a full overhaul that's required. If I missed on one event out of 13,
right,
like, you're doing a pretty good job. You just have to shore in a couple things and maybe fine tune a little bit and tweak. But I think there's a risk in being too fast to dismiss things and move on. Like we were talking about before about moving on past something. Like, you need to identify what the problem was. If you skip that step, you won't get better. And there's also, if you go too far and you dwell on those mistakes, then it's also not any good, right? Like, you can't sit especially in a competition, and be like, 3 events later, I'm still worried about that event like a while ago. It happened. You can't change it. It doesn't help you to think about what ifs, because that just like, it's going to make you crazy. It's not going to do anything. But for me, it's like identifying why. So in the first year, I frankly was not a good swimmer. I didn't grow up swimming a lot. And especially the mass start scenario threw me for a loop. You get dunked a couple times, and it was like I was just out. And I wasn't ready for that. And it was like, okay, so next year I need to like swim a bit more open water, maybe swim a bit more impacts, get used to that. And I did that. And then 2017, I got there, and the Runs from Rome was the first event. And I was like too excited. I was like, all right, I got to show that I've improved my swimming. Like, this is a great opportunity to like silence the critics kind of thing.
Right, because you felt more prepared. You felt ready.
I was way more prepared. And then I'm a good runner. So I got sucked in, frankly. I got too excited, ran too fast, and then got in the water and like should have just swam slowly for the first, say, 100 meters. But it was like, other people are hitting the water, and I'm like, it's a race. Yeah. It's a race, go. And then got halfway through the swim and like cramped my legs up, and then I just hit survival mode, and then it ruined the rest part of my run and maybe was detrimental for the next couple events. And it was just a stupid amateurish mistake of like, you got too excited, you got like too cocky, like you weren't at that level. And instead of settling for like going from a 35th to like a 20th and being like, tighten that up, and then the next year make another stride.
Right.
I was like,
you were trying to go for a top spot.
I'm going to go for a top 5. Yeah. And just like, it was stupid. It was like I wasn't.
So did you know that at that, like after that event, or did you like after the CrossFit Games are over, do you have like a post-mortem where you're thinking about each event, or was that actually like after the event happened, you're like, hey, that was a learning experience. Let me put that away for now. Let me finish out the weekend, and I'll come back and reflect on it.
I'd say I'm pretty quick on that stuff. Like that was one that I could identify right away. I was like, that was just poor execution, bad game plan. You were dumb. Like that was greedy and what you didn't need to be. And that's happened to me like twice before in my career, I guess. And once was at regionals in 2016 when I tore my bicep. It was like a snatching event, not the best snatcher at the time. The weights were heavy for me. Didn't need every other event that weekend was like great for me. It was like, you don't need to win it, survive it. And I just like got greedy and like did something dumb when I was tired and hurt myself. And that was like, you look in the mirror afterwards and you're like, what are you doing? Like, you can't. That's what it like. Now I'm better and better at like not getting caught up in that, because it's like it's 90% of the time it's going to be detrimental to you.
And really the only way to improve on that, I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, is through this competition. Those are the only times you actually are going to find out this thing about yourself, right? That you might get a little bit too competitive. You might have to tone it back a little bit. I mean, I imagine you couldn't have developed those skills without actually putting yourself in those positions, right?
I'd say it's very rare that you would find a way to put yourself in that position in training. Especially, I mean, I don't have training partners or anything, right? So maybe if you have training partners and you could do mock-up competitions or things, but so I mean, it's sort of an acquired skill through time under tension in competition. But so that, like, again, that was just poor decision making. And then last year was a bit of a combination of factors on the bike. It was like, I think a lot of inexperienced riders riding in a pack, and then I got sucked out on one side. I tried to hit a hole, and somebody else was trying to hit the hole at the same time, and then we just like took it. We had a crash, and like that was the risk of the event. Everybody knew it. It was like, try not to get in a crash, and then after the pack thins out, then you're in less danger. So it was like the first lap was the most dangerous lap, the first and the last, and I crashed in the first lap. So it sucks, and it was bound to happen to somebody. It sucks when it's you, but it was just like after that event, I was like, oh well, like. Yep. It's ownership. It was ownership. It's like, man, that sucks. Like, I wish that didn't happen, but it did. And now, after that happened, my immediate thought was that I was going to have to try a lot harder on the marathon row than I wanted to. So I was like, that's a tough.
I got to make up for it.
Yeah, like I got to earn some points, and the only other place to do that today is a 3-hour event. So, and luckily enough, that day had 4 events, so there was enough points on the table to make sure that I still stayed in the top heat, and then. It's like no harm. It's fine as long as you don't. I'm not penalized really by that, by being in a slower heat or something like that. Those are things that I think about. So yeah, like there's been events every year, but I'm like, especially last year, I think I was remarkably good at like just shaking it off and keeping to trudge for it, because I had a lot of like I fell off that net and I had the injury and I had a lot of little things, just like little small frustrations almost every event, and I was able to, continue to keep trudging.
Well, I think that's a phenomenal skill that you've been able to develop. And so how do you develop that when you're at home? I mean, yes, you have all this gymnastics career and you have all these competitions, which I think play a huge factor, right? Of your ability to kind of let go and remove and move on. But when you're training at home, I mean, you're training alone. So
what is that environment like for you, and how do you get within your own head in the garage, in your gym, etc., to get yourself in a place where you're pushing yourself enough to, become competitive at the games? I mean, because, I've always kind of felt that individual training is phenomenal, but you also need to, be in these groups where the energy and you elevate each other. But I mean, I imagine for you, what are you telling yourself going into these workouts for someone that's listening, that's training at home and wants to compete at a high level? Is it possible? What are you doing to do that?
It's hard. And I would say it's stressful because you don't know. And I think it's funny when I'm at my gym, before the games, actually, the last couple years, I've been able to be away in the summer and train. Like I trained with Paul Tremblay all before the 2017 games. And in 2016, I was staying in Montreal and I was training with Michel Letendre, and who then became my coach afterwards. But the last year I was just at home, and it was because I had to work still. And it's hard. I would say that it's hard because you train in a vacuum. Like I'm like in a tunnel. I have no concept of how fast anybody else is going to go or how good anybody else is going to be. And the only measuring stick you have is like social media, which is dangerous.
Very dangerous.
So basically I would say I train scared a lot. Like I train that like, I don't know if that's good enough. I don't know. Like I imagine that every athlete who's going to take the floor is going to be the best version of them that I've ever seen, that I haven't seen yet. And like, that's what I train for. So it's hard. And I'm always by myself, and it's like, every session you finish and you're like, fuck, I hope that was good. I hope that was good enough. And there's very, very rarely that I get a litmus test. And it's like once every now and then. And every competition I go into, like, people are like, "Oh, you ready? Are you excited?" I'm like, "Man, I don't know."
So.
I'm like, I'm anxious. Really, it's like I'm nervous. I'm excited, but I have no idea.
And I wonder if that really plays I wonder if that's to your benefit and I mean, I assume it's to your benefit now that we're talking about it because you've performed so well, but because you're always thinking like you never know where that other competitor's at, so you're basically always trying to push the threshold. But hypothetically, if you had people in your gym that weren't doing as well, maybe it would give you a false sense of how well you're doing. It could maybe go both ways. Who knows?
It's like I said, I'm training for the worst case scenario, right? And it's not that I think about Matt and Brent and I'm trying to train them, but it's just like it's everybody, man. You like whenever I look at a workout on paper, I'm like, okay, like who are people that I know that are really good at those movements, that are really whatever, and like you kind of think, all right, what in terms of time could you expect? And like I'll finish it and maybe I do it amazing, but I'm like, man, I bet you this guy cycles this a little bit faster than me, and this guy cycles this a bit faster than me. So where do I make up time? And like, I don't know. And I finished it. And I'm like, fuck, I'm not so sure I did so good.
Right.
And it is not. It's maybe beneficial in some ways, but it's probably undue stress a lot of the time, right?
And so on that note, I want to ask you about you're training alone. You're getting ready for this. What types of things before you go into an event are you telling yourself in your head? Maybe a week before the event, a couple days before the event, 3, 2, 1, go. What's Patrick Vellner thinking right beforehand?
Probably not a lot, honestly.
Thinking about school?
Yeah, like I would say that I'm very in training leading up. I talked to somebody about this the other day. Months or weeks leading up, it's stressful because you have time to do something about it. So like any time you think about like, man, I'm nervous about this event or this or that, or like, I think it's really important to identify those feelings and lean into it and say like, hey, well, I'm nervous about this weightlifting event. Like, why? It's like, it's because I haven't weightlifted enough. Like, is it because of this? Because like, guess what? You've got 3 months. Like, you can do something.
Put in the work, yeah.
So. And then it gets more and more nerve-wracking the narrower that window gets when you're like a week out and you're like, man, I'm still nervous about that handstand walk. Like, well, you only got a couple days to figure that out. And then every small miss, every small detail that's out of place feels amplified because you're like, man, I've got no time to fix this. And maybe it's just, today was a bad day, your nervous system's shot, and you miss a couple lifts, but it like hyper stresses you out. And then once you're done and you're at the competition, it's sort of like it's like a Zen-like feeling where you're like, well, here goes nothing. Like, there's nothing I can do now, so it's just execute. Like, I spend a lot of time thinking about what could go wrong, and I know this is like people will probably say this is bad, but I think it's good because if you think about what could go wrong, you can prepare for it. If I only ever think about what's going to go right, I have no plan for when things go wrong.
Right, like and falling down a cargo net and having
it's a shocker, and you're like you get frozen, right? But if I've thought about every worst case scenario, in my opinion, I can plan for them.
Right.
So I'm prepared for every possible outcome, and I'm ready for that. So that's I could get struck by lightning on the floor, and I know what to do.
And you're thinking about this,
all the time in training, right? Like that's what I think about in training. It's
struck by lightning.
This is what I mean. Like I train stressed a lot. Like I'm like, man.
Yeah.
But then when it's time for competition, you have to be comfortable with the fact that like, if that's the way I'm going to train, when it's time to compete, I need to also adopt that mentality and say like, okay, well, there's nothing left to stress about.
Right.
I've done everything. I've imagined everything. It's good. And so now it's just like show up and perform. And I feel that way at regionals every year where it's like showing up. I don't know. You look around and you're like, man, these guys are all super fit. Everyone's great. But like, I hope I'm ready, but there's only like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what your social media says or what you say or what you do. It just matters what you do tomorrow. And like, so you have to be like ready for that and okay with like, man, what I'm ready to, if things go well, I'm ready for if things go poorly. I know what I'm going to do. I know how I'm going to move past mistakes and like, that's how I get ready for competition. So leading into it, I'm kind of like, I'm stressed up until like the day of or the day before.
And then the work's already been done.
It's fine. It's like, there's nothing you can do. So there's no point.
Yeah.
So I find that like for me, like stress and like all that, like thinking about the events and visualizing and whatever is great because you can still change something and you still have control to a certain degree over what your outcome's going to be. But when it's like you're on the start mat or like the night before, like it's not really going to do anything to think about it. Like I can't go change something. I can't go fix something. I can't go do anything. Like the work's all done. The best you can do is get a good night's sleep and eat a big meal tomorrow and like and put your best foot forward and just execute. So at that point, the stress becomes like a detriment because you're like, hey, at this point, stress is going to like cause mistakes, right?
I'm taking energy away from what I need to be focused on. And
so you try to like relax as much as you can, save your energy for the floor. And I really I try to joke around a bunch in the back and chill and be as relaxed as I can be in competition because if you're really walking around with your shoulders tense and you're worried about everything or you're holding on to things, it's not going to help you. Like it's like none of that is helpful anymore. It was maybe helpful before when you could show up the next day and like put in an extra session and work on something. But at this point, it's not helpful.
Right.
It's just like that's a detriment. So I'm good at like identifying that switch and disconnecting.
Perfect. And so kind of final question on that side. You got introduced to CrossFit at basically your college gym, more or less, right? And at that point, you had no idea it would be a huge part of your life. What was kind of like the deeper reason to start competing, and has that reason shifted at all?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when I was younger, like you mean when I was starting CrossFit or when I was young
when you were starting CrossFit, like why did you decide? I mean, aside from like, hey, trying to throw down, but like, these competitions require quite a bit of pain. So why did you decide to even get into it? Because I mean, I assume it wasn't for money or fame.
Yeah, we didn't know there was going to be any of that,
right?
And
and then over time, you've still been able to, I mean, why did you decide to compete in your first competition deeper, right? And then has that changed at all over the years? Because now there is more money, there is more fame. Has that shifted any of your mindset to why you're competing for this year?
Yeah, I'd say when I was starting, CrossFit was kind of enticing just because of how quantifiable things are. And I'm someone who I like to work hard, I like to get results, and I like to feel like I've accomplished something, right? So when you can easily measure so many different metrics, then you can say, all right, cool, like I'm making progress and it's like it's addicting to be like, hey, I'm getting better, this is improving, this is getting however, and I really like that feeling, right? Like you feel like you're being productive. So I did that for a little while, and then it was just like I said, it was natural progression. Like the next step was like, oh, there's this regional competition, and you earned a spot. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll give that a shot and see what that's about. And then I think once I saw that and sort of like saw my first glimpse of what bigger competition was like, because I think the regionals was basically my first big competition.
Yeah, which is a big one. Yeah.
And so I was like, cool. This is this is cool. I can get behind this. It's kind of like people excited about this, and I think I can do well at this. And again, then you go back to the gym, and it's like I still had so much work to do that I was still seeing those like beginner gains where you're like, I'm adding like 10, 20 pounds to lifts really fast because you're like, your nervous system's just not used to doing that. Because I hadn't power lifted or anything like that in gymnastics ever.
Right.
So like things like squatting and everything like that got stronger faster until you get really pumped on those gains. And then I think that 2015 when I went team, and then I was really lucky to get the progression. Like I basically went to my first regional in 2014, then went to my first games in 2015, then went to the games as individual in 2016. Right. So like I made a very fast progression that way. And it was cool to get a glimpse of what the next stage was and sort of peek behind the curtain and say, okay, this is what you're working for. And I like that. And I like to challenge myself and compete. I'm a competitive person who doesn't like to lose and like to compete and measure yourself against other people. And I know that you're not, I don't know, people say you're not supposed to measure yourself against others all the time, but like it or not, that's how you're measured.
Yeah.
Whether you want to admit it or not.
So how about today? You've made it to the highest level, right? You've made it to the podium multiple times. Why are you going to do it again?
I'm not quite there yet, man. And there are things there's small goals that I have that are intrinsic, but I just like to compete. I like to see the test. I like to push myself against someone else and try to win. I think there's something, I don't know, there's something animalistic about that. Like wanting to just be better than the other guy. And I like that. And it's like I said, it's stressful a lot of the time, and you get worked up over all this stuff. But at the end of the day, there's something nice about competing on a competition floor. Everything that goes into it is torturous sometimes. But then when you're there and you compete and you execute well, the accomplishment and the feeling you get is amazing.
Yep.
And it is it's something that you can't really replace. So I just like that. I just like to compete.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I think about competing, it makes me nervous and stressed. But then when you get there and you actually do it, it's you're in your element, and I just like it.
Yeah, you're putting yourself in an uncomfortable position, and there's going to be someone who's going to do better than others, but at least you're going out there and you're putting yourself in a position to thrive or, and have that feeling. I mean, I get exactly what you're saying, and I look forward to actually watching you compete tomorrow, actually. It's a great opportunity for you.
And I would say for the difference between then and now kind of thing, now there's a weird, compared to when you started, there's a different obligation, right? And there's a different expectation, and there's a different level of even just the way that sport has grown and the way
on yourself or
the
from
way
other
I
people you're referring
both,
to?
I would say.
Yeah, I would agree.
And you're kind of you really put yourself on the line when you take the competition floor anytime. If you're Matt Fraser and you go any competition, you have to win. Right. If you don't win, the world ends.
Right.
And people just and everyone's in your face, what happened? What's going on? And so we're aware of that. When you show up to an event like that, I know that people are watching me well, if anything you do that's less than first place, people are just confused and worried. And it's what happened? Nothing happened. The guy was better at that. I don't know. There's no excuse. This person was better prepared. This was whatever. I don't know. It wasn't my day. You can't. But I think that it's easy to get yourself wrapped up in that and say man, I put a lot of pressure on yourself. So I'm trying to get better at shaking that off and just being you know what, I'm going to compete. It's just any competition. Do your best you can. But you feel those eyes on you. Everyone's just man, everywhere you go, people are rooting for you to win. It's oh, you're going to win, right? It's
right.
Man, I don't know. Even I leave home, my roommate's yeah, you're going to win, right?
Right.
Bring home that W. I'm fuck.
And
boys.
so you're spending time trying to alleviate that.
Yeah, okay. And just forget about that as as being, outcome based. I do want to win, obviously. But I know that it's not, I'm trying not to look at it as one big thing, you look at first goal is I show up tomorrow morning and I have to run. And what am I going to do on the run? And, that's my first goal. I'm trying not to think about the rest of them. And then
you're breaking it down into these micro
you gotta
goals.
you gotta set it up and just execute as well as you can on everything, and then hopefully you win in the end. But it's everyone just sort of lumps everything together, and I think that you get a lot of that. And it's just so it's funny. And like I said, my your friends and family do it unknowingly, and it's just man, oof. And then you start to feel that weight, and you're damn it, well, I guess I better go win.
Well, the fact that you're aware of it, I think it means you're at least working on it, right? And I think, and you have a lot of other things going on. You're not just defined by CrossFit. And so
that's what I think is an advantage that I have a little bit, is that as much as I think the CrossFit community maybe will still put that on you, whatever. I'm gonna go home and I have a big exam in like 2 weeks. So I'm gonna go home
and that exam and your teacher don't care at all.
No, they don't care at all. I'll get home like somebody after the games. Actually, I remember came home and like the couple of the girls I was working with made a little like cake or like cupcakes.
Yeah, like congratulations.
And they put like little toothpicks with pictures of me from the games in it. Yeah. And I was like, hey, nice work. And then like we saw a bunch of patients that day and no one talked about it again for the rest of the like. So it's like it didn't matter. It wasn't a thing. So it keeps you in perspective. I think that's good for me, as it grounds you a lot. It's sweet when I'm here, I'm like, I'm Pat Vellner, like second fittest man on earth. And then I go home and like you're just like Pat Vellner, the intern, who like better be doing his job and showing up on time, because like otherwise you're gonna have a problem and I'm not gonna graduate. Yeah, and, like
that's great. And so moving on to this final step, like you're still competing. What's Pat Vellner doing in the next year? What's on your mind? I mean, you're going to graduate school, right? Or
so graduate in May.
So you'll get your doctorate in
hopefully,
chiropractic, right? Yep.
And then so my plan right now, hopefully, things go well now and I do the open and I can get qualification done and just take that off my plate. Because in a perfect world for me, that gets done earlier so that I can focus on school and finishing and graduating, because I'd rather be able to put the time in now and in the next couple months and then be able to sort of coast in the last month of school, rather than be panicked last minute trying to cram things in, working extra days, trying to meet requirements. That's just not a situation I want to be in. That's just not a good feeling situation. Same as like I was saying, training last minute for a competition. Like you want to feel like you're already ready, like a month out. I don't want to be like on the last day putting in extra hours trying to like make sure I hit all my requirements.
Right.
So if I can qualify early, I can do that. I can focus on school. I can graduate. My girlfriend and I she's finishing medical school in May as well. So we're going to move back together, and she's going to school in Calgary on the other side of the country. So she's going to get into a residency program. So we're going to move probably May, June. And then start a kind of a new life wherever that is. And then, hopefully be training for the games. And so that'll be a big shift for me. But in that period, once I'm done school, I think I'm not in any rush to start practicing.
Right.
So I'm probably going to take, at least then, I mean, I'm done school, we'll move. I can focus on training for the games. And then after the games is done, relax and just like take some time, maybe enjoy some of the perks that CrossFit can bring, like some of the travel and some of the opportunities I haven't been able to take advantage of while I've been in school. And just be able to, sit back and do some of that. And just enjoy the time with my girlfriend, who we've been like living apart for a while. So it's been not easy. It's been a big challenge for the last few years. So I think we're both really.
You guys been long distance for multiple years?
Yeah. So we started dating in university, and so when she got into med school and I got into chiro, we moved. So we've been since then. It's been like 4 years, 3 years.
Do you have any advice for anybody who has a long distance relationship? Because I don't know anything about that. So
man, you hear a lot of. It feels good to hear a success story. So yeah, I'll give you a success story, because every time we talk to people, everyone's like reels back and they say, like that's ever gonna work.
Yeah.
And then now and then you talk to someone who's like, oh, that's great, good for you guys. Me and my husband were long distance for like 4 years when he was doing this, and we came back and things are great. And it's like, it's not easy. It's work. It's kind of okay for us because in both of our lives we're very busy. So I think that sometimes you get caught up, like she's working in hospital. She goes on a rotation for like a week, and you're just like, you're so bogged down that then like a week later, you're like, we haven't even chatted in a week. You have a call and it's like, it's great. You pick up, it's fine. But sometimes you just like, you feel it more than others. And it's just acknowledge that and make the time. Like we've been lucky that we were able to travel a little bit, and like we'll fly back and forth to see each other. It's far. We're like a 4-hour flight apart.
Yeah.
So it's not convenient. But it's okay. Like one thing that's funny is we always find that when we do see each other, it's like a holiday, right? So you kind of put everything else on hold, and it's like, I have 4 days. So we're just going to we're going to date for every day for like 5 days.
Right.
And you just like, you go out, you do things, everything else is on hold. And then you're not really like living real life. So I think part of us is like, man, we're going to move in together and then we're going to actually have to like work and coexist and like do our normal lives, but with each other. And it's going to be different than what we've done in the last little while. Cause every time we see each other,
it's like,
it's 100%. You go 100% in on that while you're there. Cause it's like, then she's going to be gone next week, and I won't see her for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And it's just like, it is what it is. But it's good. I think it's just commitment, right? Like, you have to be committed to the cause. And that's, if you're not, then it's not going to work. But if you are, it can be great. So it definitely shows commitment, and it can be great. And so I think we're really looking forward to that. You got to just Tarzan in between those trips that you can get and that time you can spend together, and like keep focused on the next time and the next time, because it can be tough. But right now we're like 4 months out, so there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's gonna be nice. She's gonna come out on Sunday, spend like a few days, and then go back home.
Well, I'm fired up, man. I mean, look, you've accomplished a lot in the sport of CrossFit. You've obviously about to finish your chiropractic school. Sounds like you and your girlfriend are on a great track. It's awesome. For people who want to know more about you, where can they find you at?
Probably the best is just on Instagram. I'm just at P Vellner. I have an athlete page on Facebook, but it's pretty poorly maintained, I'd say.
Yeah.
And then same with my Twitter. I'm pretty inactive, but every now and then I'll pop in with something. But I think my Twitter is just at Pat Vellner. But yeah, probably just through Instagram is the easiest. YouTube maybe. I'm on a few like podcasts like this, so you can probably learn a thing or two if you have a few hours to watch podcasts. But
perfect.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd say that I'm a stubborn person, so I find a way to get things done. That's bottom line.
That's it, man. You have been getting it done. So, well, hey, speaking of that, we're looking forward to watching you crush this weekend, and thanks for taking the time, man.
My pleasure. I hope hopefully I'll put on a good show.
All right, you will.